Hello and welcome to Ensuring Success 2022, Day 2. We are so happy that you are here to join us today and are looking forward to a great day of plenty of sessions of continuing education with some outstanding speakers that we know you're really going to enjoy hearing from. And what I'd like to do first of all is thank all of the sponsors who make this event possible, because we would not be able to offer 14 hours of CPE credit for free if it weren't for our amazing sponsors. And they are ADP, Avalara, BotKeeper, Corpay One, CPA.com, Canopy, Caseware, Field Guide, eFile for Biz, Intuit, Right Networks, SafeSend, SureLink, TaxFile, Tech Guru, Xero, Sage, and Zoho. So thank you to all of them for supporting us and making this event possible. I am Gail Perry, Editor-in-Chief of CPA Practice Advisor magazine, and before we get started, I'd like to explain to you how CPE for this event works, in case you're just joining us for the first time. So during each session, we will provide you with 3 CPE codes that will appear on the bottom of the screen. And when a code appears on the bottom of the screen, you will hear this sound. Okay, to remind you that you need to write that code down. That code is a 3-digit number. So 3 times during the session, there will be 3 codes, total of 9 digits. At the end of the session, or the end of the day, or next summer, or whenever you decide you want to get your CPE certificates, come to ensuringsuccess.com and click the Get CPE Credit option on the top of the screen. It will take you to a page where you enter the email address you used to register, and then you enter the codes for every session you attended. And after each session's codes, you'll click Go, and then click Download, and you get your certificate. In addition, I want to mention that we are up on social media. We would love to hear from you, and please tag us on Twitter or wherever your social media of choice happens to be. Our hashtag is DecemberCPE. And last thing I want to mention is that, drawing a blank, if you have any questions for us, there's an Ask a Question box at the bottom of your window where you're viewing us, and in that box you can enter questions for our speakers. If you have any technical questions, like I can't hear, which means you won't know what I'm saying anyway, but if you're having any problems with the display, you can enter that, and our tech crew is standing by to answer those questions. Or if you just have comments about what's happening here today or what we're talking about, and would like to share your experiences, we would love to have you share those comments with us, and we'll be receiving those live during the whole event. So with that, I would like to move on to this particular session, which is Marketing Your Accounting Firm. And I am joined by an incredible cast of participants who include Garrett Wagner, Becky Livingston, Kelly Welter, and my co-moderator, Alexander DeFelice, and I'll have each of them introduce themselves to you right now. Garrett?
Garrett Wagner, CEO and founder of C3 Evolution Group. We provide innovative solutions to today's CPA firms, and we have our own CPA firm division, C3 Advisory, as well.
Hi, I'm Becky Livingston, and I own a marketing firm called Pen Heel Marketing. We specialize in helping CPAs and their firms to work with digital marketing and social media.
Hi, I'm Kelly Welter. I am with the practice Cyril Kiefer Welter out of Las Vegas. We are a tax practice that deals with consulting and the preparation for businesses and individuals.
And I'm Alexandra DeFelice, Director of Marketing and Business Development for Payne & Fears Law Firm in Southern California, and co-moderator with Gail and designated bell ringer.
All right. Okay, so we're talking about marketing here in this session. I'd like to know, first of all, if you're an accounting firm, if you're talking to an accounting firm, or if you are an accounting firm, and you're thinking about maybe marketing, we kind of want to know what that means and also where you start. So let's start with what do we mean by marketing, and then we'll go from there. Garrett, I'm just going to call on you because I get to pick on the person who's
The
right
person
next to me.
closest to you,
Yeah.
the hardest question?
Yeah.
I mean, marketing's a pretty broad term, but I mean, essentially we're trying to say you're doing some kind of activity to get additional business. And marketing could be additional business from your current clients or additional business from new clients, but you're trying to get in the broad scope some kind of message out there of why should someone work with you and for what.
That's a really great point. I think we also need to be thinking about our niche audience. A lot of firms are moving toward that niche space, and if we're trying to focus on efforts related to a niche audience, what kind of keywords are we looking for? What kind of business goals do we need? What kind of resources do we need to use to reach our audience?
Well, and Garrett said it. It's also a lot of times people will think of marketing as growth and new clients, but you look at your diamonds in the rough, the clients that you already have. But on top of that, we're in a supply and demand right now. And most CPAs would come to you and say, my phone's ringing off the hook. I don't need to go out there and do anything. But it comes down to identifying what your target market is, what you want. You now have a control of what you want to do. So, figuring out how do you want to get to that point.
Okay, so when we start down the path of, we've decided we need to do some marketing, how do we actually, what's our first step? How do you start down this path? What do you do before you just go? You just don't go out and say, here's my brochure.
Well, I think that first step overall in any kind of business, okay, what's your why? What's your value proposition to start with? Like, what do you want to do? And then, okay, marketing-wise, what do you want to market? Like we talked about, is it current clients? Is it new clients? Is it a niche of industry? Is it a niche of service? Anything's a good answer, but you got to have some plan. And for us on the CPA firm side, it's all about we want to provide more services to our current clients. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like that's where we're spending all of our focus, and that's where we're seeing all the returns from because that's where we're going. Like you said, all those marketing keywords, all that drivers the conversation is current clients. We want to engage them more with more of our services.
Yep. That's one way to look at it if you're trying to increase service attraction in your firm. Mm-hmm. If you're a firm that's looking to grow, maybe potentially sell, looking at succession planning, do you need to broaden your audience to a new generation or a different business sector? And tying it back to your business goals. So if we look at maybe 3 to 5 business goals identified for the firm, we tie every marketing initiative to those goals so we can help you reach those goals. If we don't have any goals as marketers, we're just throwing stuff out there. It's kind of like a branding initiative. Mm-hmm. Where it doesn't really tie to anything. So if we can tie it to a business goal, we can say, okay, after 3 months, here's what we've done. After 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, how many leads you've gotten, how many clients you've closed, how many new services have you given existing clients. So it's kind of a big window of opportunity no matter what you want to do with your firm.
The way I look at it, I think you have to define what you want to do when you grow up. Mm-hmm. And all firms are in a kind of a transition right now, whether it's defining what you want to do. A lot of us have been so vague and so broad and general, and now we are having to, because of the difficulty, especially of tax law, but of any process. I say that you should always look at your perfect ideal client that you currently have.
Yep.
And see what makes them so important, what makes them that A+ client, and then determine on how you can get others just like them.
Yep.
Yeah, and really, the better you can define that, the better success you'll have. Okay, like for us, it's a business client between $5 and $10 million in revenue that wants bookkeeping, cash, CFO work, financial planning. Maybe it's estate work. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's individual. It can make it anything, and there's no wrong answer. That's the most important thing. Like there's no wrong answer, but it's what's your ideal client, and really define that of size, scope, services, and then from a marketing standpoint, like you talked about, you can get into, okay, what's our plan, what's our metrics, what are we to do? But if you don't know specifically who you want, on the marketing side, if you come in, you're gonna be like, I can design a marketing plan for just generic, but it's not gonna work.
Exactly. So if we have an identified buyer or target market, and let's say they are an existing client and you want to move them through the service pipeline where you're saying they currently do payroll, but we want to bring them on for tax, we want to bring them on for payroll, we want to bring them on for additional services. We as marketers need to create the content, the experiences those clients need to say, oh my gosh, I need that. So is it webinars? Is it videos? Is it tip sheets? Is it checklists? Is it ebooks? Is it one-to-one conversations? Is it in-person meetings? We as marketers come up with the concept to help you drive that home.
Right. And you need to look at the capacity.
Yeah.
You know, just
Yep.
because we're in a supply and demand market right now, we don't have the people, whether we're, you know, you may have to look at working on offshore. So how is your marketing going to, you know, deal with all of that? And just because you want the pie in the sky, how much can your firm actually handle?
And that's why, you know, now's a great time to look at this with the supply and demand and really
Yeah.
look at like, who's your ideal client? There's never been a better time
Right.
to focus that, whether it's a focus on a niche of like we just deal with this industry or we deal with this service. Now's a great time to really like narrow that down
Define
into
it.
like,
Right.
what do you want to do? We're going to do less of the stuff that's not our ideal and more of the stuff that's our sweet spot.
So this goes back to something that we addressed in a few other sessions, which is basically firing the clients that don't fit in that
Right.
sweet spot, which could be terrifying. Like,
Yep,
it's like, of
yep.
course I want all the best clients, but what am I going to tell to these guys that I don't really want? Like, and who do I have somebody that I refer them to? Like, here's my trash that I don't like, but it's your treasure. What do you do?
Well, you know, and we've actually run into this several times. I mean, we approach it with a client if we've determined that it's just not going to work. First of all, we'll look at maybe, you know, raising our prices. A lot of times price is the best way to have someone move on their own. You know, it's not you, it's me. But also explain to people that because of their changes, because of our changes, it's just not a good fit anymore for the two of you to work together. And you want to make sure that they're getting the best service, and you may not be able to offer that any longer.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not you, it's us. And that's what I've heard a lot of firms that I work with say, that we're adjusting our market. How do we fire our existing clients? And it's hard because it's personal.
Right.
They may have been a client with a previous partner for 20 years or
Right.
something.
Right.
And it's a relationship now, and how do you break up that relationship? You have to kind of ease into it. You don't send them a text message, first of all. You don't
maybe
break up on a
Garrett
Post-it
did.
note.
Yeah.
We were just talking about this.
Yes, I personally love to fire clients.
I'm going to give you a list. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because it's, you know, one, it's helpful for the firm growth.
Right.
Two, it rarely causes conflict. But I have a colleague, Paul Latham, that really got his firm into business advisory services. Like, that was the niche they wanted to grow. And they had a whole program where every time they got a new of their ideal client, they fired 2 of their Ds.
Yep.
And they'd have a little firm celebration and like, but everyone got excited behind it because they could see, they were showing the firm that transition
Right.
from we're a tax shop with all these clients that we don't like, we're talking about, to it's a big deal when we get one of the right clients. And it's such a big deal. We're going to celebrate it and we're going to transition out to. And people loved it. Like
Yeah.
the team gets behind that, like, oh my God, I see the growth. I can see it happening. And especially the people, I mean, some of the clients that are more difficult, they're a drain on everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you let them go, the positive staff reaction is just like overwhelming.
Right.
Like you'll be amazed at how many people on your staff, depending on your size, will like comment like, you know, Kelly, like, thank you so much. Like, you don't know how difficult it's been to work with so-and-so. And you'll be like, yeah, I kind of know, but
Please
like,
keep me. Please.
Right,
keep
so what
me.
if they push back and they're like, no, I don't care, I'll pay your rates, I'll do whatever, I'll change my market so that you like, because it's really, it's like, it's not like, you know, being let go from a gym or something. It's like, oh my God, you have all my personal information, like, I trust you, like, I don't want to just like go to somebody else, like.
be firm.
Yeah.
You can do it. Yeah. You will survive without them. But truthfully, most don't. Most kind of 90% of them don't
get it.
reach
Right.
back out and kind of do that. Every once in a while you will, and just be strong. Worst case, if you let 10 go and you keep 1 afterwards, you still let 9 go.
Right.
So what about that suggestion, or how can you find, there are people that do want those trash clients. I'm not talking
Yeah,
about the
there are.
annoying
Right.
jerk clients. I'm talking about like, they're just too small. They have really simple tax returns and you want to do something more complex. Like, is there a network of people that are like looking to share like that?
Sure.
Absolutely. I
There,
think there are. Yeah.
there are. In fact, we actually just experienced this. We also do estates and trusts, and there's not a lot of CPAs that specialize in that in Las Vegas. So our name popped up, and we were called by a small firm, a small company. She was an EA and had some bookkeepers basically underneath her, and she was getting phone calls all the time during the day. Sorry, it's early in the morning. I've only had 1 cup of coffee. she didn't have anybody to refer them to. So she found us on the internet, and we made a good little connection because it allowed us to see what her clients were. So when we now get the phone calls and our rates are too high or they're too simple for our level, we now have a contact. So it's there are so many networking. Yes, so we're referring back and forth with our ideal clients. But one of the things, if you are going to, if someone begs, I wanted to address this. If someone begs to stay, you have to set clear expectations. So this is what you need to do to remain a client with our firm. This is what it takes for us to be able to make this a good working relationship. You have to be very clear.
Yep. And that can also be part of the marketing initiative. If the objective is we're getting rid of this set of clients, replacing with this set of clients, you need to start thinking about that relationship with another firm to move that forward, and vice versa. So if you, like you were saying, Kelly, if you've got estate planning and something else that someone else needs, but they don't want to bring it into their own practice, can they reach out to you, and that symbiotic relationship starts to happen? I have several firms, because I work with smaller CPA firms, that do that. We do tax for this group, but they do advisory for our group, kind of thing. It's kind of like a WeWork situation where we offer different services to make us look like a bigger firm.
It is a win-win.
Yeah, it is.
And we've seen that too, of more of the CPA firm business brokers have gotten to that, before they'd sell your whole practice.
Right.
And now they're like, oh, you don't want to sell your whole practice, but you want to sell
Pieces.
20% of your 1040 practice that's this. Perfect. Like, I will now sell 20% of your 1040, or whatever it is. I'll sell a chunk of your practice to somebody else, because we're seeing that. Firms are trying to say, I don't want to just get rid of 5. I want to get rid of a sizable chunk of this or that.
Right.
So the market's responded. There's always someone looking to acquire it. And yeah, I mean, maybe you get 50 cents on the dollar. Well, it's still better than nothing for just letting them go.
So a comment came in from the audience, comment question, but they're in a small town, and so what if the clients say negative information about you now? They're like, this firm, don't use them.
I mean, that's always a possibility.
It is.
But truthfully, if you get one person running around town bad-mouthing you, generally enough of your good clients will be like, no, I work with Kelly or Gail or Garrett or whoever. They do good work. I've never had a problem. And you just sound like kind of spilled grapes that you're mad. Well, why are you mad? Well, because I brought my stuff in on October 15th, and they said at 4 o'clock.
No.
That's the one that most likely is going to go around town bad-mouthing you. And they're going to be like, you did what?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, I brought it in on October 15th at 4 p.m. And they're like, I don't do that. And that's why I got fired. And then they'll be like, yeah,
No duh.
isn't that the deadline? So it's going to happen. Once again, you can be a slave to everybody else and worry that somebody else might judge you, and you can be grumpy at work, or you can take charge and be like, no, these are my boundaries. Here's how I want to run my firm.
From a marketing perspective, you should have a listening arm to what you're doing. So what we do with clients is when we get a new CPA firm on our list, we put Talk Walker alerts or Google alerts out on the firm's name and particular partners within the firm, just in case. You never know who's going to be talking about whom. So, and we're also monitoring what people are saying about the brand. So if we do see something negative like that, we can come back with, oh, here was an award we won for customer service, or best practice in this geographic region, or here's some testimonials. So we already have an arsenal in our midst to be able to say this person's a one-off unhappy customer. Just like a food brand would, or a consumer brand would.
Yelp,
Right.
Always,
But like
people
what
only
you
go to
said.
Yelp when they hated their food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a small town.
Yeah.
Where else are they going to go? Unless they are actually reaching out, then geography is not really an issue anymore with the internet. But if it happens to, I run into this, I hear this all the time. I just met with a friend of mine who is in a rural town in Oklahoma, and I was explaining what we did. She has a farm, and I talked about being proactive and planning, and she said, do all CPAs do this? Because we've been asking our CPA that's, I don't want to say age, but a legacy CPA, let's just say that, and we can't get this, and all the farmers in the area use a CPA because he's the only one in town. And I said, well, where's your, what are you closest to? And they said, well, Oklahoma City. But, I said, I would offer to give you my services, but my fees in Las Vegas are definitely going to be more than rural Oklahoma, and I don't have the farm knowledge per se that you might need. But bottom line was they didn't have any other place to go. So I know, but you're going to run into that in small towns often.
Okay, so we need to take just a quick break to post our first CPE credit. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see a number. Be sure to write down this number. It's the first of three CPE codes that you'll receive during this session. If you're planning on claiming credit for this, be sure to take note of that number. Okay, let's talk about a pretend firm. This firm has decided that they want to expand their reach because they've decided to offer, let's say, payroll services, which they hadn't done before. And they know they need to get the word out. Where do they start?
All right, so they've identified the service, payroll, okay? Next step is, what size clients do you want for payroll? Because that's going to dictate it. If you want small, like solo practitioners, who is it? Do you want any payroll client, or do you want payroll client in a niche? Like, you just got to narrow that down more. So Gail, since you've made up this make-believe firm, we'll ask you, who's your ideal payroll client? Like, how many employees do you think how many employees?
Well, I think that's something that we need to discuss with our firm and see what our ideal client looks like of the clients we already have. If we were to start offering payroll services to our existing clients, who would we really want to give it to?
Okay.
So think about that. And why do we like that size firm? Probably this is a conversation you'd have with your partners or colleagues and come up with those answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you said, okay, current clients we want to do it to, and we like clients with 5 to 15 employees, great. You've got now your market that you can then be like, hey, marketing expert, like, let's put a plan together.
Yes, and the next thing I would ask is, what is the industry those clients have? So for example, if they were in the sports industry, professional sports in particular, they have people traveling all over the country, possibly the world, depending on the sport.
Right.
Do we have the bandwidth and the knowledge to handle that kind of a situation? Or do they have just local small businesses that have revenue under $2 million? What kind of payroll are we looking at? Do they pay weekly? What kind of services do we have to offer? And then, is there an additional service that we can upsell after that? So you're not just looking at your existing opportunity, you're looking at the next opportunity, because then that, as marketers, it can help us to build the content, build the structure to help move them toward the next piece of the funnel, which is, here's where we're going to start with payroll, but next they're going to need tax services, or next they're going to need retirement planning or succession planning or something else for the employees. So what's next after payroll? What's the next logical step?
You want to look at the capacity too that you have and who's going to be performing these services.
Yep.
Do they have payroll knowledge? And what does that mean? Does that mean calculating the payroll? Does that just mean doing quarterly reports? Do they have the knowledge? Are you going to have to deal with out-of-state issues? Who's going to be talking to them? And then, are you going to be making any money doing this? That's a
Ding,
key.
where's the bell?
Where's the bell? Yeah, we need the bell.
Just kidding.
No, it'll
We're
scare
going to
people.
confuse people.
No,
I'm
I'm
like,
so
oh no, I'm going to get shot. I won't be welcome back next year.
But that is an issue. A lot of times those new services may not bring in a lot of money when you start looking at competitors. And is it worth it? And again, when you have a supply and demand issue right now, do you want to take your key employees that really may be able to help you in more profitable services and take them to another service?
And there are software decisions to make too.
Software decisions as well, yes.
But let's say we've ironed all that out.
Great.
We're ready to go forward. We want payroll services. 5 to 15 employees is our sweet spot for clients, and we've got our software lined up. We've got these 2 people on our staff who are just raring to go. They want to be the payroll gurus in our firm, so they're all set to take on all these new clients. Now what?
We have to talk about what initiatives can we put in place. So branding is going to be one of those things, getting the word out. I always tell my clients and my students that if you have a great product and no one knows about it, the product doesn't exist.
Right.
So if people don't know you offer that service and you don't tell them, they're never going to know. So we have to tell them. What makes you different than the other person down the street or the person down the road or the next state over. So this goes back to the unique selling proposition. We are offering these services. Who are the people we're offering it to? What sets us apart from our competition? And then we look at keywords to help with branding. We look at content to help with branding. We look at getting those people out in front of other people. So if you have your 2 people on the team, who are those people? What makes them special? Why are they doing this service? So we can kind of start the relationship and build that knowledge around those 2 people.
Let's back up a little bit. So you said we look at keywords. What do you mean by doing that?
Well, that's a great question. So search engine optimization is how you're found on the internet or any social media platform. So when we think about keywords, let's say we'll go back to this sports analogy that you're going to do payroll for professional sports teams and their clients, their people. We need to look at keywords that are used in social media and on search engines to make sure that we are found for that service. If we just use a blanket word like payroll, everyone under the sun's going to find you.
Right.
Or you're going to end up on page 72 of Google, Bing, or Yahoo. I don't go to page 72 half the time. I don't even get to page 2. So if you're not on page 1, we have to create that effort to make sure that you get on page 1. One of the easiest things you can do is a Google My Business listing, which is free. Why wouldn't you do it? And in that listing, you would put payroll services for professional athletes or professional sports agents or whatever they're called. So we have to look for the research, make sure we're finding the right keywords. Don't rely on somebody to say, oh, I know what that is. It's payroll for athletes. And we look up payroll for athletes and nobody searches for payroll for athletes. So that's not the right word.
So where do you look?
Well, that's proprietary. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I do think we have some more follow-up questions, but I think we need to take another break.
Yeah,
Jill.
let's before we do the questions, let's throw up the second throw up. It's really too early for that. Let's place the second CPE code on the screen. On the bottom of the screen, this is the second code for this session. There will be one more. All right, questions from the audience.
Yeah, actually, well, it was a comment about where somebody, it was a follow-up on the small town and saying that people still actually said great things, and they said that they're recommending them on Nextdoor. And I'm like, this is just, I'm like, how interesting.
Yeah.
So it prompted me to think of like, can you talk about some unique channels to market your services?
Oh, that's a great point. Anybody else?
No, go ahead, marketing expert.
I like the idea of Nextdoor. There's also...
And can you explain that for people that aren't familiar with Nextdoor?
So Nextdoor is an online, almost like a local chat room. Almost like a Facebook group, but not on Facebook. It's kind of more public. And it allows people in a community to talk about what's happening. You can find contractors and people who specialize in different services. But it's for your community. So it makes it much more local. So someone will say, oh, I know Ed at this CPA firm, and people are like, oh, I know that name. I recognize, I've seen that street sign for the office location, you know. So it's a local place where people in the community talk about each, you know, things that they can get and do and services that are offered. Having a presence in that space without doing heavily promoted kind of things. You don't want to go out and talk about me, I. You want to talk about things that are helpful to the community. So maybe it's, hey, you know, tax planning is happening now. Here's some things that you should be talking about. And maybe you give them a checklist link. Because the checklist is free, you don't need to have them sign a form. But if they want tax services, then they do need to fill out a form or connect with you somehow. So creating that relationship. Nextdoor is one of those. Facebook groups are really good for that. LinkedIn groups can be good for that. One of the things that Facebook does is a lot of times they have a town community group.
Right.
And that's a great place to build relationships with people, but not just talk about your services. Maybe you're talking about the bake sale that happened or the car wash or the whatever. So you start to build a relationship.
But a key thing, especially, I grew up in a small town. So, I mean, you still have nickel ads, in some places. You put an ad in nickel ads, but it's all about relationships. I mean, this industry, I tell people all the time that CPAs are humans too. So you have to get out into the community. You can go into most businesses and they still have a place where you hang up a card or, they have little things. You can go to local clubs, whether it's, Elks Lodge or something like that, and do little kind of community outreach, even informational stuff like, you know, you may not have access to tax law, but this is what you might want to think about in preparing your own tax return this year. And then they're going to go, wait, what? But you get out there, you help in the community, you just make your face available, just like in any marketing thing where it takes, you know, 7 touches. They're going to remember you when they need a stimulus check and they haven't filed a tax return because they didn't need to. But if they keep seeing your face show up at all these events, then they're not going to forget you when they need you.
And right now, there's so many ways that we can market. Like there's a huge list, but we kind of said all the work is identifying that client. So we'll go back to that payroll professional sport team analogy. Okay, if that's your thing, okay, for that group, where do they go? How do you get in front of them? What are their pain points? Like, you know, they're not at the Elks Lodge, they're wherever. What's their networking group or their social group, or what are their questions? What are their pain points? How do you get in front of that group?
So Garrett, those are good questions to ask. How do you find the answer to them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them, like, it's kind of an exercise. If they're your ideal client anyways, like if you want to focus on professional sports teams and payroll, then you should know for them, well, you went back to, what's your value prop and what are their pain points?
Yep.
Okay, then a group like that, it's a small market. You know, you're not talking hundreds of thousands of people. You're saying there's 100 people that you can find on LinkedIn pretty like, here's the 100 people I want.
Yep.
Let's go kind of like, hey, I wrote this article, I did this podcast, I did this talk. Here's checklists on payroll issues for a professional sports team that I wrote up. Like, there's a bunch of things you can do once you know that target client. And nowadays, whether it's Google or Facebook or LinkedIn, you can get pretty detailed targeting on almost demographic, or you can still do it like old school in person. You can go to the Elks Club or the Chamber or wherever. You just got to know who that target market is, and then it's easy to get in front of them, but you got to figure out who they are first.
Well, the other step is that in this particular scenario with the sports teams, getting to them before they become a professional. So high schoolers who go to college on scholarships, they're allowed to get paid now. A year ago they weren't, so there's been a change with that. And some of the students are getting $100,000 stipend for playing sports. They don't know what to do with that. I mean, who knows what kind of background they have.
Right.
You throw a $100,000 check at an 18-year-old, I know the first thing I'd buy would be a car.
Me too. Ooh, what are we going to get?
Yeah, right.
That's another conversation.
Jewelry. No, I mean, you know, so helping the parents of those students and even going to the colleges to educate the athletes so that they can start creating that retirement planning, investment strategy, payroll, because they don't know what they're going to be doing, especially if they're a traveling team. They don't know about the tax laws. So we as marketers say, okay, so you want to do professional athletes, let's get to them before they become a pro.
And even something like that, it's like, okay, that's a new industry, but that concept's old. I mean, my uncle's a lawyer, he's long since retired, and he did doctors. And he started working, I don't know, long time ago. But he kind of said, like, he'd say, how did he get doctors as clients? He goes, well, I'd go talk to him in med school.
In med school.
Like, I'd talk to him 3 or 4 times a year in med school on here's your legal issues you're going to face when you get out. And then big surprise, they all become doctors in town. They need a lawyer. Well, who do I know? I know this one guy that I've seen speak a couple times. Sure, like it wasn't time consuming, but he knew his niche was doctors in this town. That's my thing. He got in front of them early. And it wasn't a ton of time for him to go speak on the college campus 3 times a year.
Yeah, because you can then use that element. Let's say you're speaking at a campus and they're recording it. That then becomes snippets that we can use somewhere else, whether it's in a video, a social media post, a webinar somewhere else. So you take that element and say, how can we break this up and use it in multiple places?
You also, if you've identified a niche industry, it's more than likely you already have that client. So don't forget to go back to your existing clients.
That's what I was going to say. I love industry. So my last law firm that I worked for, we went to market by industry for 6 industries, and we're like, we're going to do everything for you guys. We know everything, and we also know the accounting professionals and this and that. And we just asked, what do you read? A manufacturing company. Oh, we read Manufacturers Monthly. Some of it was so specific, like trucking today or whatever, where it's like, okay, maybe I don't need to be in trucking today. But if you want to focus on truckers, maybe you do, right? So asking them, and like then we would subscribe to those magazines. We would write articles about legal issues and accounting issues for manufacturing companies, and that is like amazing. And the same thing of like, what conferences do you attend? Well, there's a manufacturing symposium in Timbuktu. Okay, I'll go there, right? Like so.
But they also talk.
Yes.
They talk
Yes.
to all their friends that are also truckers or whatever. And you know, we always say that the greatest compliment is a referral from a client. Well, the greatest compliment for a client is saying, "You're my ideal person. Please send me more of you."
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I think that's something that accounting professionals shy away from.
Oh, yeah.
They won't even ask for a testimonial. Like someone will send. You know, I'm the marketing director for firms, right? They'll send me something and go, look at this great thing my client wrote. I'm like, can you ask them if we could put it on the website? And they like freak out. They're like, oh, I mean, you put your things on LinkedIn and everything else. How do you get over that fear? What can you ask? Can you create a form so it's less intimidating?
You can, and we've done that in the past. I mean, CPAs will do like surveys, you know, just to see what can we help you with? How are we doing? And it might say at the bottom of that form, and can we share this on our website? Can we share your testimonial? That's the simplest thing for shy CPAs that don't want to say, please write something about me. That's the easiest way to do it. But really look for those cheerleaders, especially, and those that maybe, and especially in a small town like that, you know, look for those that are well known in the community.
Okay, and then the other thing you said about
She's just full of questions.
I am, because I'm a marketing director, so of course, like I'm like, this is my sweet spot here. So you always hear this other thing too, like ask them to refer work, and sometimes they don't really know how to describe you. So how do you arm them with that information to say, how do you know to identify the right person to tell? Like definitely, you don't want them to tell everybody to use you if they're in a different industry, right? How to give them enough talking points to go, this is who I want you to refer me to, and this is my elevator speech so that you know what to say.
Well, you got to have that. It
give
goes
it to
back
them,
to that, like, okay, like if we're going to use our example of the professional sports team that Gail started on us, that she's probably regretting a little bit. But like, okay, like, hey, you're a professional sports team. Like, we want you to feel that we handle all, whatever it is, what your pitch is, like, we handle all your payroll issues, no matter how big or small you get across the globe. We handle your payroll issues. We take the pain away from payroll. I mean, that shit is like, hey, your fellow CFOs of other professional sports teams, just let them know, like, if you have any problems with payroll, you call this firm, they take the pain out of payroll. Like, but you should have that. But that's part of that. Remember, step one, what's your value prop? Who's your ideal client? So if you're in the trucking industry you talked about, you should already know as a firm, like, why should they hire us? Oh, because we specialize in. You should have that little bit of an elevator speech. I mean, sometimes it's not perfect, and you work on it over time, and you refine it, and your first draft gets changed. But like, you got to have that basic. And a lot of this marketing stuff, you've heard us talk about it. There's a million ways you can do it, but all the hard work is narrow it down. Like, find that ideal client, narrow your focus. Who is it? You keep hearing us asking those questions. Like, let's get more specific. Like, more specific, more specific, more specific.
But he said it. You know, and when you're talking with the client, you can say, I love working with truckers. Okay, you just narrowly defined.
I like that.
To
You're
your
slipping in the sales thing without asking.
Yeah, exactly. I love working with truckers just like you. You know, you make great clients. I love the relationship. You know, you've encouraged me to gain extra knowledge that I wouldn't have had before. You know, really put it back on the client. I know. I'm going to start doing truckers now, right?
Get your little truckers hat.
Exactly. Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
We might have some.
A horn. A bell isn't going to cut it.
No, you need a horn.
Yeah, exactly. So, but really define it just in those simple little conversations.
And you need to create that experience in a way that they'll understand it. So I always say that when people ask me to work in the medical industry, I'm like, no, I don't know the language, I don't know the words.
Right.
So if you're working in the trucking industry, you must know the words.
You have to.
Speak to them as if you were one of them. Pain and payroll, love it. I'm going to steal that from you. No one's trademarked it yet, right?
Okay.
So talk to them like, you know, like they would be. Even at the end, if you say, let's put the metal, you know, pedal to the metal and bring on some new clients, something that ties back to it. And as a marketer, we have to do that research and find those words, because the CPA might not know them and they're not going to write them.
Well, and even like, okay, like, we've seen this with firms before. How about finding the words? Okay, if you want to
Yeah.
say something, here's your little script.
Yep.
Okay, you're going to say to them, hey, I'd love for you to recommend payroll for us. We take the pain out of payroll. Say that. And if they say, great, thank you, you're good. If they say no, like the script says, you flip over. If they say no, say, thank you very much. I look for, whatever. Like, here's your kind of like wrap-up
Here's your
line.
next, yep.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you value us as a client, as a provider.
Yep.
I'll talk to you next week when we're payroll.
Yep, a couple
Like,
different scenarios.
They've got that kind of like, okay, like if it goes good, I say this. If it goes bad, I just like, here's my little exit.
Yep.
Say this and like take that pain away of like you make this ask and then you feel like you got to stay on the phone call and it gets awkward. Like, here's my simple out of like,
Yep.
I asked you for this. If you said no, no big deal. I said thank you and we move on.
The other element is that the person who's pitching this needs to believe it. So, for example, if someone were to put me on a perfume client, I would be completely clueless because I have allergies. So I don't use perfumes. I don't know anything about the industry. I couldn't work well with them because I don't understand it. Just like the medical profession. I don't work in it because I don't understand it. So if you put on a team to work with truckers or athletes, whatever it might be, they need to understand the industry, not just the pain points, but the industry. What does it feel like? Maybe they go on an event with somebody. Maybe they ride in a truck to see what the experience is like. It's kind of like when you're doing inventory for a manufacturing company. You send the juniors in to count, right? Everybody's got to count. And until they do that experience live, they don't really understand what it means.
But it's every piece of the message.
Yeah.
It is what you wear.
Yep.
We're not going to show up
In a suit.
in a full suit when we're hopping in a truck,
Right,
know?
right.
And you may switch, especially if you're talking with a client that you have a long-term relationship with. Your language is not going to
Right.
be that professional elevator script with monotone.
Let's
You're
talk
going to
about
be
your EBITDA and
yeah, exactly. And
You
you're going to
know.
be more the communicative language. You know,
Right,
how it
right.
you really have a talk like we're doing right here. It's not like we were sitting yesterday when we're quoting all the tax credit things. Completely different
That's
conversation.
how I like this session a little better.
I know. Yeah, me too. Can you tell? I know what year I'm talking about. But you have to. You got to read the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really have to read the room to figure out how you talk, how you dress, how do you approach it, and just the general feeling and atmosphere.
Is there a passion about it?
Yeah, But that
Exactly.
unfortunately is something that a lot of CPAs don't think about. And there's so many firms I work with where I ask them like, oh, what's your biggest client? So-and-so, okay, tell me about that client. And they're like, I don't know.
Right.
They make
Like-
$10 million a year.
Yeah, I'm like, no, but like, okay,
45
like
employees.
if they're your biggest client, you should know not just like, yes, how much they make and the people's name. You should know something about what they do.
Yep.
And so often, especially then you go down the list of clients, and they're like, I don't know, they send us their stuff and we do it, and their name's Bob and Sue, and like I know their kids,
stuff.
but like, okay, but I get that. Like, what does this business do? There's a name here and there's numbers. What does it do? And a lot of them are like, I don't really ask those kind
Yeah.
of questions.
That will lead to a good follow-up question, but I think we need to take a CPE break.
We do. We have one more CPE code to give for this session. We're going to display it on the screen right now. So be sure to record this as the third CPE code for this session if you're planning on collecting CPE credit. There's one question I would like to ask, and that is, as you're going through these activities, whether it's creating your elevator speeches or creating some kind of outreach or using social media, what kind of decisions do you make about how to measure your results to determine whether or not what you're doing is successful?
I mean, like, it's anything else? Okay, what are we going for? What do we get to track? Is it just, once again, a lot of work up front in figuring it out? Okay, if we're new to the payroll space, do we just want to get our brand out there? Or do we specifically want to say, okay, we want to close 10 payroll clients a week? Okay, so we've started to learn, and they see this in the marketing side. Okay, to close 10 payroll clients a week, we've got to get in front of 1,000 people this week. Because if we get in front of 1,000, we're going to meet with 100, and of those 100, we're actually going to sign up 10. Okay, so you now know every week, I got to get in front of 1,000 new clients to get 10. And that's your metric. And every metric's different, every industry's different.
Right.
But it all tends to fall down with the funnel's huge to begin with.
Yep, it comes down.
And it's kind of scary how it whittles down from like 1,000 equals 10, or it could be 10,000 equals 10.
But there's money associated with this too, and time that you're spending in order to do this stuff.
Yes.
Correct.
So,
Even if it's not tangible money, it's time, effort, energy. So even if, social media is free. Everyone, it's free, 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 free. Someone has to do it.
Someone has to do it.
Someone has to do it. How much does that person cost?
So I have a follow-up question to Gail's question and then an audience question. Becky, I'm going to put you on the spot because this is like a marketing
it.
thing.
Let's go.
Can you talk about leading versus lagging indicators? Because what Garrett's referring to are a lagging indicator. And everyone's like, I want that dollar to show that the time and effort and money that I put into marketing gives me a dollar. But that's a lagging indicator. Versus the leading indicators could be how many people did I talk to? How many articles did I write? Can you explain that a little bit more to give people ideas of maybe some potential metrics?
Sure. So when we're looking at, depending on what the goal is, let's say the goal is branding. We're starting a new service line. We're getting it out there. The metrics we're going to look at for branding will be impressions, shares, community voice. It's very passive metrics. It's not going to be a hard dollar number, but it's going to be starting the funnel where we're saying, okay, we're spending this effort up here to generate brand awareness. What's the next step that starts to lead them into purchasing a product, which is the legging network? Measuring this and making sure that you're paying attention to where people are coming into your website from, where a lead comes from, whether it's a phone call, an email, a form submission, tracking all of that, but starting with certain metrics related to the initiative. Branding has certain metrics, lead generation has certain metrics. Conversions have a different set of metrics, and conversions they're actually a lead, they're a client now, that's the last metric. And there's a whole bunch in between. So there's about 12 to 15 metrics we would look at, and depending on the initial initiative would determine what we need to monitor. And as we move through the funnel, those metrics are going to change until it becomes a hard dollar. So if I spend $25 on Facebook ads, what did I get for $25? Nobody called me. So did I get nothing? No.
No.
Your branding initiative brought 10,000 eyeballs to your website. But nobody called me. Well, that wasn't your goal. Your goal was branding. Your goal wasn't leads. If goals were leads, then I would do a different initiative.
Right.
But I think this is the hardest piece for accountants.
Yeah.
We're so numbers
Numbers
focused.
focused.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
numbers focused and quality versus quantity.
Yep.
This is the hardest thing. But the number one thing that we have to realize is it's okay to change things.
Yes.
You need to go back. You make a plan, you assess it, you go back and adjust it. You make a plan, and it's just trial and error until you find what really works for you. Because you may set these metrics and they're not reasonable at all.
Yeah. And I think for me, as a person who's a planner, like COVID opened that up to me. So I had a new mantra, which are there's no rules, there's only guidelines, and they're subject to change at any time.
Absolutely.
And it's like, that didn't work. Oh, well, throw it out the window. I don't freak out. I just change my approach. So here's a follow-up question that I want to ask you, Kelly and Garrett, because if you're not a full-time marketing person or can't afford to outsource it and you're a small firm, the audience question is, I don't have anybody internally focused on marketing. So how much time or percentage, here we are with the numbers, or percentage of time should we be focusing on marketing efforts at the partner level?
At the partner level.
Well, I'm a partner and in a small firm, and we have to work in our business and work on our business when we're at this level. I don't have a set percentage. I'm not real great with setting that. I try to, even if it's an hour a day to work on marketing and admin.
Yeah.
But then you end up spending 4 hours because you just picked up 2 clients that you weren't expecting to call. So you have to do what you're comfortable with, and
Do you
adapt
calendar
it.
time for marketing, or is it just kind of a natural thing for you?
My partner does. I'm not real good on my time entry because I do a lot of relationship building, and for it may be going out to meet for coffee that will pay off in the end. But
Yeah. Garrett, what
it's
about you?
hard.
I mean, I would bring it back to, okay, if you really want to grow, if you do want to grow, you've got to make time for it. Or maybe realistically, you don't need to grow because you're already at capacity. I mean, so I'd kind of push it back a little bit to really dive into that question of what do you want to do? What are your strengths? If you're someone that doesn't like to do business development and that's not your strength as a sole practitioner, okay, stay away from that. And maybe try and find you some more passive marketing things through an outsourced third party where they're just going to produce some some ideal content for you in your niche and do some things.
Yeah.
If that's not your thing to be this like networking person,
Hire Becky.
you get it.
Yeah, outside source.
Yeah, you doing it is going to be awful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't force
Yeah.
yourself to do it
Yeah.
because realistically, you are probably a tremendous like practitioner doing the work or tremendous at the client relationship side.
Yep.
And that's what people value. So don't give up what you're good at to try and do something that you're going to struggle with.
That's a great point. I have a client in Colorado. I've had him for 8 years, 9 years now. And I keep telling him, you're in the construction industry, do a happy hour. Even if you're sitting outside on your deck with a beer, do a 30-minute or a 20-minute happy hour till you're done with that beer and give them some information. He's like, no, I'm not talking to anybody. I don't want to do webinars. I don't want
Wow.
to talk to anybody. I'm like, oh my gosh, you have such an opportunity. Go to the local bar. I mean, it's Denver, for goodness sakes. There are bars all over the place, microbrews.
But even now, I'm sure he could hire someone to give that webinar for him.
He could, but he doesn't want to.
But that's his. But he's got that option now,
He
like never
does.
before, to be like, listen, like we can find you someone to give this
Yes.
webinar under your brand.
Yep. I've
And
told
they're,
him that.
They're not going to shy away because it's not him. They'll be like, oh, great, it's still good information coming from this source.
Yep.
And look for
Yep.
group activities,
Yeah,
constant
yeah.
contact newsletters, or constant contact where you can send out a happy Thanksgiving,
Yep.
and you can have a staff person prepare that and send it out. But it's still a connection. It's
Yep.
still marketing.
Communication.
Yeah.
All right, we are out of time. But thank you all so much for incredibly valuable information and a great session. We will be back at the top of the hour with our next session, which is on succession planning. And we'll see you then.